I'd like to call to order the regular meeting on 12/7. I'd like to call our council member Laura Tano to the floor for pledge allegiance and invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dear Lord, as we look back at 2020, we see a year of trials and tribulations. We ask that you comfort those in need and keep at your side those who have you called home. Please protect our community and those that protect us here and abroad. We ask for knowledge and assistance for our doctors and scientists as they work with our most vulnerable. We ask for your blessings and grace, and we ask for a prosperous 2021. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Well, we're all present on the December 7th, 2020 meeting. Now I'll ask the city clerk to give information, please.
While the Goodyear City Council meetings are open to the public, the occupancy has been reduced to implement social distancing. Seating is generally available on a first-come basis, but meeting attendees will be cycled in and out if necessary to allow for speakers to speak on certain agenda items. If you wish to speak during a regular meeting, please complete a speaker's card so that we may ensure you are in the room for that item. Face masks are required and must be worn when moving throughout the building. Our residents still have several ways to address the council. They may submit their questions and comments to publiccomments@goodyearaz.gov, and during the meetings, they can view the meetings using Facebook and YouTube. Tonight, our Granicus live stream is down. After the meetings are completed, they can also be viewed on YouTube. The public may always send an email to the mayor and council at any time by sending an email to gycouncil@goodyearaz.gov.
Thank you very much. Now is the time for citizens who would like to address the city council on any non-agenda item within jurisdiction of the city of Goodyear. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
All right. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak? Oh, we have more of an audience tonight, don't we? Very good. Okay, then I'm going to start the consent agenda. So will the city clerk please read consent agenda items 1 through 9 by title only, please?
Number 1, approval of minutes. Number 2, approve the final plat of Goodyear Civic Square Parcel B, Phase 1, subject to stipulations. Number 3, approve the final plat of Goodyear Civic Square Parcel B, Phase 2, subject to stipulations. Number 4, approve a new Series 12 restaurant liquor license for Mariscos Camarón Paleo. Number 5, approve resolution number 2020-2117 approving replat of Lot 1 of Airport Gateway at Goodyear and Minor Land Division of Goodyear Fire Station 181, providing authority to modify to make technical corrections, providing direction for recordation of documents, and providing for an effective date. Number 6, approve the final plat for Cotton Flower Marketplace, lots 1A to 4 and 6 to 9, subject to stipulations. Number 7, approve the final plat for First Park at PV 303 South, subject to stipulations. Number 8, accept the dedication of 3 public utility sidewalk and access easements, and 6 water line and access easements within Estrella Parkway from various entities. Number 9, approve the acceptance of 2 quitclaim deeds from Unidynamics Phoenix, Inc., a Delaware corporation for portions of property on North Litchfield Road and West Van Buren Street.
Thank you. Does anyone in the council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Then may I have a motion and a second to approve items 1 through 9? Do I hear that motion?
So moved. Second.
I heard a motion from Vice Mayor Stipp and a second from Councilman Pizzillo. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Hampton?
Aye.
Councilmember Kano?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
The motion carries.
Well, let's go to the business. I'd like to remind council to wait for the motion a second before discussion. We'll start with number 10. This is our first item on business, to consider approving the first amendment of the development agreement for Elwood Logistics Center. Deputy Director of Engineering, Stephanie Senko, will present. Stephanie? Stefan. Why don't I get it right? Uh-huh. There you go.
Steve's good, or Steven.
Thank you. Let's do Stephen. It's so much easier, and then I wouldn't have made the first mistake.
May I use the Elmo? Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm happy to be here this evening seeking approval of a minor amendment to the development agreement for Elwood Logistics Center. Some quick background. Elwood Logistics Center is approximately 1.3 million square foot building currently under construction on the southeast corner of Saraville and Elwood Street. You can see an exhibit on the Elmo here from November 30th. It's well underway. As council may recall, the city previously entered into a development agreement with Elwood Logistics on June 6, 2019. It's an aerial of the area. In the agreement, Elwood Logistics agreed to construct the remainder of Elwood Street from the eastern end of the property to Estrella Parkway, in addition to the half-street frontage, which is their normal requirement. The agreement included terms for reimbursement of the cost of the improvements subject to certain maximums, and the terms were more favorable if completed by a certain deadline. The construction was not completed by the deadline due to a variety of reasons, including complexity of drainage design, coordination efforts with the adjacent property owners and irrigation district, as well as some of the delays resulting from impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The amendment, Elwood Logistics has requested an amendment to extend the deadline for completing the improvements. They're offering to provide the city with an extra easement to allow for the storage of additional off-site drainage, which would be a benefit to the city. Staff is supportive of this amendment, as it would be a win-win for both the city and Elwood Logistics. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? Will the city clerk then please read resolution number 2020-2119 by title only, please?
Adopt resolution number 2020-2119, conditionally approving the First Amendment to the Development Agreement for Elwood Logistics Center, the First Amendment, providing for an effective date of the First Amendment, providing authorization and direction, providing a deadline for execution of the First Amendment, and providing an effective date of the resolution.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and second to approve resolution number 2020-2019? Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion from Councilman Kano and a second from Councilman, thank you, Hampton. Open for council discussion? No discussion? Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Hampton?
Aye.
Councilmember Kano?
Aye.
Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
The motion carries.
We're at number 11. The item is on business is to consider adopting the 2021 state and federal legislative agenda. Government Relation Manager, Jenna Cariccio. Yeah, good. Will present.
Well, Stephen certainly put me to shame on my timing hoax. He was quick. So, get settled here. Mayor and Council, it's so nice to see all of you in person tonight. As the mayor said, I am in front of you this evening to present to for your consideration the 2021 state and federal legislative agendas. If approved, these documents will provide critical direction when weighing in on bills at the state capitol that are of most importance to you and to the benefit of our Goodyear community. Sorry. In addition to highlighting our federal and state priorities, I will also give a brief recap of this year's election results, review our federal and state representation, and give an overview of a few of the topics I anticipate seeing this session. But certainly, if you have any questions or thoughts throughout the presentation, please feel free to interrupt at any time. And I do want to take a minute. I know that all of you know this, certainly better than anybody else, but I think it's really important for those watching at home to know how involved and engaged all of you are in your various capacities across the region. It is hard to overstate the significant and lasting benefit that your work on external committees brings to our community. Your positive reputations and influence amongst our peers enhances the leadership and image of our city and the region and across the state. Mayor Lord serves on the executive committee of the League of Cities and Towns. This leadership role helps to ensure Goodyear will have a seat at the table during the creation of the League's policy development. She also serves on Maricopa Association of Governments Regional Council and Transportation Policy Committee. as well as she is Goodyear's representative on the Luke West Valley Council, which meets quarterly to discuss the happenings of Luke Air Force Base and the surrounding community. Vice Mayor Stipp serves on the Valley Metro Board of Directors, the Audit and Finance Subcommittee, and COVID-19 Executive Committee that collectively help advocate for our city's transit needs. Councilmember Loretano serves on the board of the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, as well as she is the vice chair of the National League of Cities Public Safety and Crime Prevention Advocacy Committee. Councilmember Campbell serves on MAG's Human Services and Community Initiatives Committee, as well as chairs NLC's Military Communities Council, is president of Women in Municipal Government, and is a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and Advisory Council. Councilmember Hampton has previously served on NLC's Community and Economic Development Committee, and this year was appointed to serve on MAG's Economic Development Committee. And I know this is only a small sampling of how you all stay involved and engaged. I know I haven't included any local committees or community groups. So in a very fitting season finale to 2020, this year's election brought unpredictability, divisiveness, and the highest level of citizen engagement in 40 years. Generally speaking, Republicans held strong victories across the state, the notable exceptions being the Democrat wins in the races for president, U.S. Senate, and the state Senate seat in Legislative District 28, located in Metro Phoenix. Of course, Proposition 207, legalizing recreational marijuana, passed, and the income tax increase dedicated to education passed with Proposition 208. In order for the legislature to amend either of these initiatives, they'll need a 3/4 vote, and they'll need to win the argument that their bill is furthering the purpose of the intent of the proposal. Last week, high-ranking members of the legislature filed suit challenging the constitutionality of Prop 208, arguing, among other things, that it violates the constitutional requirement on new statutory taxes to be levied through 2/3 votes of the legislature, which was Prop 108 in 1992. The city of Goodyear, as you all know, is represented by the state's 2 U.S. senators, Kirsten Sinema and Mark Kelly, as well as congressional districts 3 and 8, served by Raul Grijalva and Debbie Lesko, respectively. Please excuse the senator-elect on the slide. This was created before he was sworn in last week. In a typical year, we would all be heading to D.C. in March to meet with this congressional delegation in person at the National League of Cities Conference. Unfortunately, this year it will be mostly virtual. But I do want, just to say, rest assured, we do remain in regular contact with our federal delegation and their staffs and stay connected despite these recent challenges. On the federal side of things, we are keeping an eye on policies and budgetary shifts that may impact the mission of Luke Air Force Base, including protecting military airports, limiting encroachment, and expanding future missions. Goodyear is part of the West Valley Partners that helps provide federal representation to support and protect the base as well. I also wanted to highlight the importance of working with our federal delegation as we build a robust transportation network. On the regional side of things, we are actively working with MAG and our local neighbors to potentially extend the current half-cent transportation sales tax in Prop 400 that expires in 2025. But on the federal side of things, we want to encourage policies and budgetary priorities that emphasize the importance of local infrastructure and maintenance needs and allow us the ability to seek additional federal and grant funding opportunities. This slide is just intended for comparison purposes. Last session, we saw a record number of bills introduced, only to see the majority of them fall victim to an early adjournment brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Last session will go down in modern history as a session with the fewest new laws enacted. Senate leadership has already made a commitment to fast-track a good majority of the bipartisan bills that were held up solely because of the way session was adjourned last year, and we will likely tackle those first right out the gate of the session. So for the sake of timing and to compete with Stephen, I will not read through this slide, but do want to highlight again the legislative leadership in both chambers. This will be the case for the next 2 sessions. And of course, as you all know, our city is encompassed within 2 state legislative districts. Here is our LD4 representatives, Senator Lisa Otondo, Representative Charlene Fernandez, and our new representative-elect, Joel John. Both Senator Otondo and Representative Fernandez will be joining us virtually during Wednesday's legislative breakfast, and Representative-elect Joel John will be joining us in person. The meeting that I had with him a few weeks ago, he was very excited to meet all of you and was looking forward to the opportunity. Do want to point out it's telling for his potential within the caucus to already have a vice chairmanship under Representative Dunn's Land, Ag, and Rural Affairs Committee. And of course, in LD 13, we're all very familiar with these faces. This representation continues. I do want to point out the chairmanships that each of these members now have. Senator Kerr will be chair of the Natural Resources, Energy, and Water Committee. Representative Osborne will chair Health and Human Services, and Representative Dunn, as I mentioned, will chair Land, Ag, and Rural Affairs. We expect Senator Kerr to be joining us virtually on Wednesday, and both Representatives Osborne and Dunn will be here in person. So before I get into some of the highlights on the state agenda, I do just want to review how I determine how to take a position on a bill. I read every bill that's introduced, and with the great help of our department directors, I send out the bills to their relevant departments, and based on their feedback and insight, use this guiding document through the prism of this guiding document to help me consider what position to take. So listed here, do just want to highlight two key tenets that I know you're all very familiar with, and that is preserving local funding and supporting local control. These are easily the most common tenets we see threatened during any given legislative session through preemption efforts or unfunded mandates. We tend to see a number of bills that push the onus to local governments or paint cities under the broad stroke of a statewide concern. Beyond these more general examples shown on this slide are a few of the efforts I anticipate being big-ticket items this session. Of note, Mayor Lord successfully championed a Goodyear policy proposal through the League's resolution adoption process. This bill was brought forth by our clerk's office in an effort to reduce burdensome and antiquated posting requirements. This proposal reflects staff's commitment to identify and eliminate red tape that could ultimately help save taxpayer dollars down the line. I do anticipate that we will see firefighter cancer presumption reappear. Although Senator Heather Carter lost her bid for re-election, Senator Paul Boyer will likely continue to champion this effort. Last year, Senate Bill 1160 deemed it a presumption when a firefighter or fire investigator was diagnosed with certain cancers to be conclusive and irrebuttable under certain conditions. This bill passed the Senate 25-4, and I anticipate seeing the same draft introduced this year. Also anticipate a number of efforts to address issues specific to COVID-19, including this interim's formation of a joint ad hoc committee that is charged with making recommendations for legislation to limit future governors' ability to declare a statewide emergency. To date, they've met one time, but it's likely we'll see a bill next session to include recommendations from this committee. And of course, what's on my radar when I hear this is what impacts there might be on local governments or mayors' abilities to declare their own local emergencies. In that same category, there's been a number of conversations regarding civil liability. And we saw a bill last year to provide limited enforcement actions and civil liability during the state of emergency for certain entities, including businesses, nonprofits, and schools. And despite our best efforts to include local governments in last year's draft, the effort as a whole died with the abrupt end to session. And then last but certainly not least, something you're all very familiar with as you received a number of constituent inquiries, is our safe policing practices, especially in the wake of civil protests across the nation. We do anticipate seeing a Republican-sponsored bill to require body cameras for public safety personnel, as well as additional training on de-escalation tactics and third-party use of force investigations. On Wednesday, we will have the honor of hearing from Chief Rodriguez on his department's current policies and practices in front of our legislators, and it'd be a great opportunity to continue that conversation. And so with that, I'm happy to go back to any of the slides I've shown or answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Nice presentation. Are
you.
there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? Will the city clerk then read resolution number 2020-2120 by title only, please?
Adopt resolution number 2020-2120, adopting a 2021 state and federal legislative agenda and providing authorization to the city manager or her designee to take action.
Thank you. Can I have a motion, a second, to approve resolution 2020-2120? Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion by Councilman Loretano, a second by Vice Mayor Stipp. Open for council discussion? Yes, Councilman Pizzillo.
Hi, Jenna. Have you heard anything about extending the the stay on foreclosures and evictions. I heard something the other day about the federal government's talking about it, from the House to extend it. Hear anything on the state level? Because I think it expires, what, December?
Yeah, Mayor Lord, Councilmember Pizzillo, I think our best bet at seeing something will be on the federal level. I know this weekend they were going through negotiations for the next stimulus package. Governor Ducey's eviction moratorium expired at the end of October, and so our state's current regulations have been under President Trump's executive order, which expires at the end of December. So I do anticipate that we will probably see an extension of that date within the next stimulus package.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, discussion is finished. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Hampton?
Aye.
Councilmember Kano?
Aye.
Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
The motion carries.
All right, we're at number 12. The item business is consider approving adopting the City of Goodyear's grant policy. Jenna is presenting? No, Jenna is not presenting.
Another Jenna's presenting.
Another Jenna. But,
Christina?
That's Christina.
well, Jenna came, I know, but she came to the office this morning, so before anybody corrects me on this, and told me she'd be doing the presentation. Is that okay?
Who's who? Yeah, yes, Mayor, you get both Christina and I tonight.
Right, Christina was not going to be here, so my directions is to introduce Jenna. But Christine, it's so nice, whatever happened, that you could make it tonight. But it looks like you're going to work a team. Yes, good.
That's correct. Thank you. Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. We are here tonight seeking Council's approval of a grants policy that would specify how the city would pursue grant opportunities and establish a process for the city to serve as a municipal sponsor for nonprofits that were looking to apply for Prop 202 gaming grants. This policy was developed in cooperation with the City Attorney's Office and with the Finance Department, and it was also reviewed with all of the other city departments, and is based upon policies from other cities that we were able to use as models. Now, as you know, the city already aggressively pursues grant opportunities. This isn't anything new. But the reason we're coming before you today to request your approval of this policy is to really formalize and standardize the process that we go through when we're looking to apply for a grant or to then accept a grant that's been awarded to us. And again, as I mentioned, to also establish that process to serve as a municipal sponsor, which would allow nonprofits in our community to access the Prop 202 gaming grants. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. And so with that introduction, I am going to turn it over to Christina, and she'll walk you through some of the main components of the policy itself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the purposes of this policy, when we use the term grant, we're talking about external funding for programs or projects that are administered by the city that we earn through mechanisms like competitive discretionary grants or block grant opportunities, typically from other units of government. Also by application to private foundations or corporate foundation programs. For the purpose of this policy, we are not counting sponsorships or donations or in-kind contributions, and development agreements are not considered grants. Now, the city manager already has authority to sign agreements under $75,000, but agreements over $75,000 require council approval. To be consistent, our intent is to seek council approval in advance of any applications we do that are over $75,000 and applications that would create new city programs or services or add new positions, anything that may further obligate the city so that staff doesn't find themselves later down the road presenting something to council that you wouldn't be supportive of if we were to get funded. As I mentioned, our intent is to always seek council approval for opportunities that fall in those categories before we submit an application. However, there may be situations where time constraints, because we find out about a funding opportunity and the deadline is quick on approach, and there's not a chance to get on a council agenda, affects staff's ability to meet those deadlines. And in those cases, like maybe during a council break or something like that, the policy establishes that the mayor may provide conditional approval for staff to proceed with an application contingent on subsequent council action. And in those cases, then we'd bring the fact that we were applying for this opportunity back to the full council as soon as possible, and the application would be withdrawn if it doesn't receive council support at that time, but at least we would make the application deadline. Conditional mayoral approval should be reserved for unique situations, though, and every effort should be made to bring grant opportunities to council prior to submittal. There are two situations then when we would seek council approval after an application, but before signing a grant agreement. And the first would be if the grant was under $75,000, but the grantor required an IGA or some sort of official council action to complete the grant agreement. And the other would most likely be due to some sort of administrative oversight where council previously authorized an application, but did not simultaneously authorize entering into the grant agreement if it was awarded. It's our intent to seek all of those approvals at once so we don't have to keep eating away at your valuable agenda to get administrative steps taken care of.
Okay, so as I mentioned, the second piece of the policy establishes a process for the city to serve as what's called a municipal sponsor for a nonprofit organization that would be seeking to apply for Prop 202 Indian gaming grants. When Prop 202 was approved in 2002, allowing tribes to engage in gaming, it did specify that the tribes would then share a portion of their proceeds, either directly with local governments for services to the general public, or that nonprofit organizations or schools, for example, could apply for that funding, but only if their application was sponsored by a municipal government who would serve as pass-through. So the policy that we're proposing would establish and streamline a process for the city to review any requests that we would receive in order to then serve as a sponsor for organizations that are looking to apply for those grants. The policy establishes that these are the criteria we would look at if we were to receive a request. This is to make sure that the grant application would, A, be in the best interest of the city and also in the best interest of the community. So we would want to make sure, for example, that they're proposing to serve residents in Goodyear. We would want to make sure that it's not competing with an application that the city might be considering to put in for that same grant opportunity. If multiple requests were to be received, we would approve, if you will, or sponsor any that we received that met these criteria. Since the city is not really the final recipient, we're just serving as a pass-through, we wouldn't be competing against ourselves and would allow the grantor, or in this case the tribal nation, to determine whichever grant they felt best met their priorities. Just to outline a little bit about the process, if we were asked to serve as a municipal sponsor, we would, of course, first review that all of the criteria would met. We would then sign or approve the application on a staff level, unless the grantor did require council action, in which case we would bring it forward to council on a consent agenda. If they were to then be awarded the funds, the city would receive those funds. We would execute a pass-through agreement with the nonprofit organization prior to then distributing the funds to that group. But the city would not in any way be responsible for performance or financial monitoring. It's purely an administrative act of serving as that pass-through. And with that, Mayor and Council, that completes our presentation. We'd be happy to take any questions and would recommend Council's approval of the resolution and grants policy.
Thank you
Thank
very
you, Mayor.
much. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? All right, will the city clerk please read resolution number 2020-2116 by title only, please?
Adopt resolution number 2020-2116, approving and adopting the City of Goodyear grants policy.
Can I have a motion, a second, to approve resolution number 2020-2116? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion from Councilman Hampton, a second from Councilman Pizzillo. Open for council discussion. Vice Mayor Stipp?
Okay, we'll go from there.
Oh, you gotta back up.
Good thing there's two. It's like a drummer. My first question is actually for Rourke. So, the policy all the policy says on the, in case of emergency brake glass thing for the mayor to do it, it just says mayor. Is it necessary that we say or designee in the event that the mayor is, the physical mayor is not, we're on a council break, the mayor's on vacation? I think that's different as an acting, but is that,
I think that's probably covered under the city code and the charter, because it
Okay.
talks about the vice mayor acting in the absence of the mayor or another acting mayor. So
okay, so it's irrelevant.
I believe it's
Okay.
covered.
Just double checking. Second question is, there is not a provision in the policy, but I think it would make some sense that there's an automatic notification to council that the grant application has been done. I think if we're going to do it, if we're giving up some of our responsibility, we at least ought to be notified. And it can be something as simple as a manager's update or whatever, just, hey, we've done this. And then third, I didn't see in the resolution on the pass-through grant, I guess I'm going to say, does the $75,000 limit apply to the pass-throughs as well? It's kind of silent. And just making sure that, oh, we're not going to do a $100,000 pass-through to whatever without council's authorization. So can you at least talk to that one?
Sure. Mayor and Vice Mayor Stipp, that's actually a very good question, and I don't know that we had necessarily looked at those two pieces together. But no, I think that certainly would make sense. You're right, that would be quite a large amount of money for the city to be sponsoring. Passing through. So yes, I would think that it would make sense to use that same criteria in addition to the criteria specifically for the municipal sponsorship piece, that we would also use that 75,000 threshold.
Okay, so if the rest of the council is agreeable to that, this motion that we've made needs to be amended because the resolution talks about Exhibit A, and that's in Exhibit A. So I'm looking to the attorney.
All right, is that so? I'm going to let you make the motion. You asked for
Yeah,
it.
Mr. Smart Guy.
Yeah.
I looked at it earlier, it didn't click until you were talking, and I'm like, let me actually look at the resolution. So I apologize for not having that teed up earlier. And then Exhibit A is the policy.
Thank you. And we're talking about the pass-throughs from the tribal nations,
Yeah, so if,
because it is an appropriation. I mean, it's received by the city and then it's appropriated out. Under 75,000 would presumably be under the authority of the city manager. So if you want to change that, you probably need to make an amendment to the Exhibit A.
that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So if you just want to reference that into the motion, we can revise Exhibit A to be consistent with that. In the event that the city receives monies that, I guess, have passed through to a third party, the city manager is authorized to approve that appropriation.
But what about the sponsorship of the application?
What, excuse me?
Would that apply to the sponsorship of the application? So one step is to sign off that we would agree to fulfill this role. And what I think I hear you saying is we would agree to fulfill this role staff can make that decision if the application meets all the criteria of the funder, if it's below $75,000, but if it's over $75,000, staff would seek council support to sign off on an application.
I thought that was.
Are you talking about for
Over.
pass-throughs?
Yeah.
So I believe that we would be mirroring the pass-through the same way that the grant policy is written for city grants. If it's over 75, the first step would be to come before council and then get authorization at that time for it to go all the way through the process.
Can I just throw a one sentence that might solve this? And I apologize for everybody that's watching and listening to this, and I feel really bad about not catching this earlier. Municipal sponsorship in excess of $75,000 must receive city council approval prior to authorization by city staff.
Okay. So that just brings it to council as we've normally done in the
For
past.
pass-through. I mean,
That's
that's
fine.
just one line. Everything else is
That's
right on
fine.
target.
Mhm.
Now, we've gone through all that. I don't know if anyone else agrees with me, but
Yeah, so you're going to make the motion to
Yeah.
make this change?
yeah, so, and I think I do that as an amendment to the original motion, if I've got my Robert's rules correct.
Yeah, just make a motion to amend, an amendment to the main motion to add the sentence you just spoke.
Do you want me to do that now, or you want to wait?
You might as well do it now.
Okay, and Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we amend the original motion to include in the policy under municipal sponsorship that all municipal sponsorship in excess of $75,000 must receive city council approval prior to any authorization by the city staff.
Do I have a second? All right, it's going to be roll call. I'm
Well,
assuming.
we're still talking.
Discussion?
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I think.
That's why I asked her if she wanted to do it now or wait till the
Yeah,
end.
don't we have to, discussion on it? Is that what where are
Yeah,
we?
you discussed the amendment at this point. The amendment's on the floor.
All right,
Just the amendment.
all right.
Just the amendment.
Councilman Campbell, you have,
Well, mine's not on that, it's on the whole issue. So you put a monkey wrench in it again, as usual, Bill. Thank you very much. So we've got to debate your sentence, and then we can
This
come
is
back
why
and talk
I asked
about
the
the
mayor
whole
if she wanted to
thing.
do it now or later, Wally. I
Yeah,
didn't mean to throw a
it's
monkey
okay.
wrench into it.
Because sometimes these nonprofits don't know how much money they're going to get. They put in for the tribal money, and they say, we want to buy a mobile pantry van, and it's going to cost $94,000. And they apply, but then they get $10,000. So we may approve that, yes, if they get the 94, we'll let them do a pass-through, but if it's, they don't know. And sometimes they don't put the right amount of money in. So you saying what you said, to me, it was already in the resolution, but that just probably spells it out more than what I was reading in it, because I wasn't trying to find a loop,
I wasn't either. It just
so,
presented itself.
okay. So we can vote on his motion.
I don't know, I saw Christina go like this.
If there's no more debate, then you can vote on the amendment.
Okay. No other discussion?
On the amendment.
Just on the amendment.
Just the
Yes.
amendment.
Roll call vote?
Vice Mayor Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Hampton?
Aye.
Councilmember Kano?
Aye.
Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, so we have a first and second on the other motion, so now let's do a roll call.
Well, we'd like to talk
Discussion,
about it.
discussion.
Thank you. You want to talk? She wants to talk. I want to talk. Joe, you want to talk? Okay.
Councilman Kano?
Thank you, Mayor. A number of our nonprofits are not located in Goodyear, and they serve, it's a regional approach. And so will they be limited to only serving Goodyear? They bleed over to the other districts for our sponsorship.
I think the intent is basically the concept being we're not the funder. We're just facilitating the access to people who are serving our residents and others to access those dollars by being a pass-through. And we recognize council's desire to increase access to resources or services for our residents. So we would look that they are at least serving Goodyear residents, but it wouldn't have to be exclusively serving unless council wants it to be exclusively serving Goodyear residents. Now would be the time to make that distinction in this policy.
Okay. How will we communicate this role to our nonprofit community? Or are we already doing this? I mean, how will we let them know how this works?
We haven't communicated anything with them or done this in the past. However, grant writers have asked us if we would be a municipal sponsor. And that's typically how that's how it got on our radar in the first place, when we didn't have a policy or process at that time or an understanding of what it would be getting the city into. So since we were already working on the grant policy, when the request began coming in, we incorporated it into this. So it would be on our website as it is on the City of Mesa website or Gilbert, for example.
Okay. And my last question is that the city is not responsible for performance, which is good. You can't monitor it, but we're attaching our name. So are you going to, I know you have criteria, but you are going to vet out the nonprofits, or it's people that we're already in relationship with, or?
Because it's
No?
not for us to make that determination. If they met the criteria that's outlined in the policy, that's what would be advanced to the tribe for them to make a determination of whether or not to invest in the organization or not. And then in terms of removing ourselves from any performance requirements, it would be incorporated into the IGA that we do, that says we're going to deposit the check, write a new one, and be done.
Okay, so then what is good standing with the city? What's that criteria mean?
That they're current on their taxes and license, business license and registration
Okay.
and things.
Thank you.
Any other comment?
I have some questions. I
Councilman
have a couple
Campbell?
of questions. Is this proposed grant language going to apply to all departments in the city? Police, fire, everybody?
Which, the grants policy?
Mhm.
Yes.
Because if I remember correctly, I thought fire got money from the tribes for some fire suppression equipment or something, personal equipment or something, and how did they get it? They must have passed it through the city anyway, right?
Oh, do you mean for municipal sponsorships or for the grants policy?
The grant itself.
But a tribal grant?
A what? A tribal grant, yes.
Okay, so the grants policy would apply to the city's grants application process. Regardless, it wouldn't have anything to do with the municipal sponsorship policy. So if the fire department, for the sake of example, decided to pursue a Tohono O'odham grant opportunity, and it was less than $75,000, did not create new positions or a new program or service, then fire would just submit the application, and if it was awarded, we'd let you know in a manager's memo, great news, we got some money. If it was over $75,000, or if it was creating a new program or service, or if it was adding new positions, then, or there was an unbudgeted match, then we would come to you prior to submitting an application and say there is a Tohono O'odham grant opportunity. We would like to, these are the kinds of things they fund. We plan to ask them for X amount of dollars to do this with your permission. And if you say okay, then they'll proceed with the application. And if they get funded, roll with it. And if they don't, then they didn't get
I
funded.
think my question really was, is police and fire going to be able to continue to put in on their own grants without all of this other stuff?
Yes.
And as long as it's under 75,000, it doesn't come before council. We just get notified that they've got it. And I don't want to do anything to hamper them
Nope.
from getting the grants, because they hear of things that none of us ever hear of.
Right.
And I also want to address, the nonprofits know to ask the cities for a pass-through. It's not something we need to tell them. If they need a pass-through, they will come to us and ask us, because they've done it before. All Faith has done it many times, and I keep sending them to other cities because we couldn't do it for them. But it would be nice that we would be able to do it, because they serve only Goodyear and only Buckeye. And that's really close to home. The charities or the nonprofits that are serving many cities, depending on where they're based, I don't want us to get so overwhelmed from Phoenix charities or Avondale charities or Surprise charities that we're not able to help our own people, even though they do maybe give some services to a small number of Goodyear residents. And I don't know that we would ever be able to determine you have to do 300 a month or 1,000 a month or whatever. I mean, that we just can't do that. But I just want us to be aware that once we start doing this, we need to be selective, because the larger, the nonprofits that are in the larger cities are already doing them. And they just may think it's an easy pass to ask Goodyear, which is okay, but I would prefer to keep it as close to Goodyear as we can, because you said other cities do this already.
Right. I mean, generally, the tribal nations have relationships with the
Everybody.
elected official. Right.
Yeah, we
And-
all get a letter.
Right.
And then they tell us to, you want to apply. So I pass it out to every board I sit on and say, go for it, because they want to reach as many as they can.
The guidance
So-
that I got from my associates in Maricopa and Mesa and Chandler was
They
a
do that.
good way to curb the administrative burden, because
Good.
that's the issue for the city is really an administrative burden.
Right.
And the way to curb the administrative burden is to put the caveat that they should be serving
Right.
your residents.
Right. And so
With-
they apply, we approve it, they apply. The money comes to the city of Goodyear, and then the city of Goodyear takes the money, deposits it, cuts a check to the charity, and then the charity expends it however they said they were going to do it. Then they send the reporting documents back to the tribal or whoever they got it from, and we don't have to do any type of administrative work whatsoever, other than we're just taking the money, depositing it, and then issuing another check direct to them for the full amount with no service charge. Very good. Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Kano?
Aye.
Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Hampton?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
The motion carries.
All right, we're down to 13 on business to consider approving the mid-FY 2021 budget changes. Finance Manager and Budget and Research, Lori Wigenroth, will present. Lori?
All right, oops, on the first slide, we're jumping ahead. There. Thank you. Nice to be here talking to you, and
Nice to see you.
once again, working on the budget. We just, it's become a year-round thing this year. But here to talk to you about some additions we'd like to recommend that you make this point in time in this year's budget. If you'll recall, we did, come on. We talked to you at the retreat in November about kind of an idea of what's happening with city resources and city expenses, as well as then discussing with you a general look at we're looking for next year, and then some the additions that we'd like to make. And so I'm just going to kind of briefly go over today why we have the resources to make these additions at this point in time, and then kind of walk you through what those additions are. And so I'd start with reviewing how last year finished. So FY20 ended on June 30th. And we did reduce our revenue estimates in March when the pandemic was declared. But we did finish the year well above our estimated revenues. And also with expenditure savings, we typically have expenditure savings and typically have revenue increases. Some of you, these numbers are the pre-audit results. They were prepared in October. Some of you may have been at an audit committee meeting today that may have seen a slightly different number for the general fund ending balance. It's about a little bit less than $2 million lower than what's shown here. When I talked to you before, I shared that we were still pre-audit and moving forward with that work. So the 21.3 million increase in our ending fund balance will be about a little bit shy of $20 million when we come back and show you the first round of discussions for developing the 22 budget. But essentially, revenues are the main reason that our expenditures are up. That fund balance is up. And kind of the reason those revenues are up were, in addition to our normal conservatism in preparing revenue estimates, we were especially conservative given the nature of the pandemic and the timing of which we were preparing those estimates. We had no information or very little information last March on what would happen to our revenues and expenses. And we didn't anticipate some of the behavior changes that came along with folks starting to spend more time at home. So there were things like auto incentives that may have changed spending behaviors or the timing of spending. Certainly the stimulus payments were made that had some impact on people's spending behaviors. Again, kind of staying at home. I know I've heard lots of stories about people making home improvements and those types of things that may not have otherwise happened. And for us, those are taxable activities, so they bring in revenue to us. And then the restaurants adapted fairly quickly to takeout and found a way not to have their revenues drop as significantly as we initially anticipated. The other thing is we are, if you'll recall, starting with last October, we had a new tax on online transactions. And so those revenues are coming in. They were not revenues we had in the past, so they're new revenues to us. For the most part, there is some evidence of some substitution, but not significant. And those revenues are coming in higher than we anticipated. Again, brand new revenue source we were very conservative with. In addition, Goodyear is just growing. I looked at last month's building permit activity. It's again higher than the prior year, which was higher than the prior year, which was higher than the prior year. So we continue to benefit on the revenue side from that growth that's happening. And then, as I mentioned previously, we've always take a conservative approach, especially for the construction sales tax and those development-related user fees. So those were some of the reasons why that revenues were up so much. As we move forward, I'll talk a little bit about why we feel it's okay to move forward with these changes now. In making this presentation to you and making these recommendations to you, we again just want to emphasize that we're assuming there's no major change in response to the pandemic. We know there is some increase in the infection rates right now, but we're assuming kind of consistent with what we've experienced so far through the pandemic, that there's no changes at the federal level in terms of funding coming to us or not being available to us. We're also not assuming that a normal economic recession would begin in the near term, and that there won't be any significant slowing in the growth that we're experiencing. And we certainly don't see any sign that is going on at this point in time. So in terms of why we're here and why we feel you have the resources to move forward with these actions, if you recall, we did two things when we adopted this year's budget. One was, the first thing we did is we reduced our revenue estimates in both prior fiscal year FY20 and for FY21's budget. Those revenue reductions totaled $12.3 million. We created the capacity in our budget that if those revenues materialize, that we would be able to spend them. So we created the appropriation capacity that if we collected this $12.3 million, we could actually use it to pay for expenses. More than that $12.3 million has been recovered. So in all of the areas where we did make reductions, that amount or more has been recovered. So we returned up, we're actually above what our estimates were last March. So that $12.3 million was not budgeted on specific expenditures. It was budgeted in case these resources came in. The other thing you did when you adopted the budget is we adopted a special contingency of $17.1 million in the general fund. That was revenue that we were in our revenue estimates, and a decision was made to take a conservative approach to expenditures. So then rather than allocating that $17.1 million to expenditures in the adopted budget, we set it aside with a promise to come back at mid-year to talk to you about if you could reallocate, if you could use those resources for other purposes. So again, this was already provided for in the budget, and we feel that because revenues are booming or revenues are above where we were, certainly spending this contingency would be a reasonable approach. So any questions about that piece? Otherwise, I'll just kind of give you some highlights of what we're recommending you add.
Questions, council? I haven't heard you use the word booming before.
Yeah, I
so
kind of, then I backed down on it.
It's a great feel.
It certainly feels that way when you look at revenue estimates. In fact, I'll share with you a little bit. We have, since the pandemic, we've started peaking at sales tax revenues early. You know, we can't guarantee anything till the month closes, but it looks like our revenue estimates again for the month for the business activity in October will be exceeded. It looks like ongoing revenues are about $1.4 million higher than the estimate for the month, and construction revenues are about $1 million or more above or $600,000 above. So we are still seeing significant revenue growth compared to our estimates. And then they're also, the retail areas are showing double-digit growth over last year's actuals as well. So in terms of the recommended changes, one of the things when we did discuss the budget with you, when you adopted it in June of last year, both the management and the council was very concerned with and very clear that they wanted that there would be a mid-year discussion about compensation increases for non-represented employees. If you recall, represented employees, their agreements were negotiated prior, essentially completely negotiated prior to the pandemic. So those were honored by the council and those raises were provided. They were about 5%. In July, in the adopted budget, non-represented employees received a 2.5% market increase. So what we're recommending now is an additional 2.5% merit increase, which is movement within your pay range. So it doesn't change the pay ranges, it gives you a raise within your pay range. And if somebody's at the top of their pay range, they get a lump sum payment of 1.25%, and that's consistent with our past practice of lump sums are half of what the merit increase is. Those pay increases would become effective with the pay period that begins on January 10th. Then the other budget additions, just a quick summary here of kind of what we're recommending you add. So about $8.7 million in general funds, split almost 50-50 between ongoing and one-time expenses. And then a couple of items in the water fund and the wastewater fund. Also, that would be adding 34.2 full-time equivalent positions with these adjustments. And I show you the column on the end, the part year ongoing. That's our estimated cost of what the ongoing pieces will cost in FY21. Since we're adding these items mid-year, our normal practice is to account for the full cost of the items. So in the first columns, we're showing you the full year cost of something like the positions that are being added. But that $2.5 million in general fund is what we estimate the actual increase in ongoing costs will be this year. And we just share that so that you know already there's about $1.5 million in additional ending fund balance that will come at the end of this year because we won't spend that whole $4 million of ongoing resources. So just to kind of walk you through the changes, the highlights of the changes, not all of the changes. You had in your packet a list of all the recommended changes, also just a summary of the changes that involved positions. And then we provided you a high-level summary of all the additions that you've made to the budget from adopting this budget, some changes that were made in July to these changes that we're recommending today. So you can see a full recounting of the changes that you've made from the FY20 budget. In fire, you are adding 3 captain positions, or you're being asked to add 3 captain positions. We're showing the cost offsite by some overtime reduction with the addition of those positions. And we're also recommending converting a fire staff support position in the fire prevention area be converted from a half-time, part-time position to a full-time position. I'll also note that one of the changes since we talked to you in November is in the fire additions. We've reduced the one-time cost of the item related to their recruitment plans. If you recall at the retreat, there was some discussion about whether or not those numbers included the potential cost of Station 188 staffing in case the city pursued a SAFER grant. We have removed that part of the one-time costs from that, so that item has been reduced so that the budget does not anticipate any positions or any cost for ramping up for Station 188. Whoa. So, IT, I don't know if you can get that back for us. I don't know what I pushed, but I will.
There
they got it? Okay. In police, we are adding 2 officers, one for traffic and one for investigations. In terms of civilian support, that was a big emphasis of the police chief, was to bring in some civilians in areas where they could also then free up some sworn people that are doing some of this work. So we're adding a position in records supervision, field operations, and a crime scene supervisor position. In addition, there's a recommendation to add a municipal security coordinator position to deal with citywide security needs, and we're recommending that now to help plan the new city hall as we continue to work on that project. In the court, we're recommending adding a bailiff, which will have some impact on freeing up some of the police officer resources that are used in the court now. And then there'll be a supervisor for case processing. It's currently funded on a one-time basis. This would add that position on a full-time ongoing basis. In the development-related areas, this is another area where we've made a change from what we presented in November. We hadn't reduced the engineering one-time assistance request for the amount that they could absorb with salary savings this year. So this is another area where we've reduced the one-time amount. And if you'll recall, the original budget only adopted 25% of their forecasted temporary staffing needs. So this adds the temporary that we believe will be needed for the balance of the year for them to keep up with those building permits and planning activities and all that that's going on. Also recommending adding a position in IT to support development-related systems. I know there's a project in the capital plan to have them work on a new permitting system, so that position would help with those types of activities. And then also a scheduling system for their inspection area. And then you've already approved one aspect of the Bullard landscape enhancement reimbursements. We came forward to you with the first entity that was eligible to be reimbursed. This adds the amount that's needed for all the anticipated reimbursements for the work that's being done to enhance the landscaping along Bullard. I don't remember which one I pushed, that was the bad button. In parks, we are recommending adding 7.4 positions associated with the recreation campus. This is, we funded opening the doors and letting people come in and use the basic services in the adopted budget. This adds the additional recreation or the additional programming services that were anticipated in the original project. So it's not an increase from what we intended to fund. It's just that when we did the bare bones budget at the beginning of the year, we opted to not recommend those at this point in time. So this brings the facilities to how we intended to open them. It also adds another summer recreation site. Those are very popular, and so we'll have another site available, and then also add additional staffing for the arts and culture program. We've had a park ranger program going on for a couple of years on a one-time funded basis. This recommends moving it in the positions to a full-time ongoing status, or not full-time positions, still part-time positions, but an ongoing program. And we add a project management coordinator, a lot of projects going on in that department. They have their asset management program and other things, so this will help them move those forward. And then some ongoing funding. We've had a number of years where we've also been funding one-time levels for changes in watering levels and fertilization levels. This puts that all on an ongoing funding basis, as well as extending some vacant property cleanup on city-owned facilities. At the ballpark, we are recommending adding 4 positions. The MLB teams are using the property longer, which makes it harder to maintain it. Some of this will be offset by revenue for the cases where we can charge them within the terms of the contract, but the cost will not be fully offset by that. We're also adding a part-time position to do maintenance, which I guess that piece is supposed to be 0. And then some equipment for that area. Technology, we're recommending quite a few positions. The city's had a lot of growth, and we need to keep up with that on the technology side. We're adding a GIS analyst, which is primarily to support the development that's going on and getting those addresses and things in the system. A project coordinator, and then an infrastructure engineer, and then an AV technician to help us in settings like this, as well as to help plan the new city hall needs as well. In the finance department, we're recommending adding a business analyst to help better use the financial systems you've made some investments into. Public Works fleet is an area, again, that's significantly impacted by growth in the city. So we are recommending that a technician be added that would support public safety vehicles, and then also funding to send some non-public safety vehicles out to outside to have maintenance done on them so that we can keep up with turnaround times. And also an administrative position to help manage the fleet assets. And in the water fund, we are recommending additional funding related to some of the recommendations of the Water Conservation Committee. And then we do have some expenses associated with the response to the pandemic. One of the things when folks, we did not lay off anybody, but people who've worked for us recently went to work for somebody else and got laid off, and that caused our unemployment expense to go up. So we have had some increase associated with that. We also no longer have access to the Perryville crews to do right-of-way maintenance, so we are adding outside contract landscape services in lieu of the Perryville crew. And we don't anticipate the Perryville crew becoming available anytime this fiscal year, so we do believe we will spend all of those resources. There's also a number of enhancements that we're funding for the ballpark in anticipation that we would be able to open for some level of spring training. So we're asking you to go ahead and approve those enhancements, recognizing that if for some reason spring training doesn't happen, we would only make the required expenditures, but we would not necessarily move forward with all those recommendations. And then we've also had some bulk trash volume increases with, which we're calling COVID related, because I don't know about you, but I know in my neighborhood, there's all kinds of bulk trash, so more than there was before, furniture, appliances, it's amazing. So we're adding some funding in solid waste to deal with that increase. And this is, just gives you a summary that if you make all of those recommended changes, this just gives you updated estimates for this year's revenue. Again, these are the revenue estimates that we've been exceeding, that we've just talked about exceeding in October. So with those updated estimates, we would still finish this year with $5.4 million of uncommitted ongoing resources and $67 million in one-time resources. Those would typically move into the developing the budget for FY22 as one-time resources, but they'd certainly be available to you as well for later in the year if something comes up and you wanted to do something this year. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, ask you if you would approve the compensation, position, and budget changes that are recommended.
Thank you. We like all that happy news. Very good. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? And can I have a motion and a second to approve the compensation changes, position changes, and budget transfer to implement? Non-represented 2.5% merit or 1.25% lump sum compensation increase effective with the pay period beginning January 10, 2021, and budget and position changes outlined in attachment A and B. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I've heard a motion from Councilman Campbell and a second from Councilman Loretano. Open for council discussion. Councilman Basillo.
Hi, Lori. Great job. Just to follow up mainly for the parks area, as they start pulling more demand on the fields. I know in our contract we're limited, but I really would like, when it comes time to negotiating any additional, to see what we can do with those ball teams to help kick some money in for that, because I don't think it's the taxpayers' responsibility to pay all those additional costs. So again, as a partner of ours, I wish they would, when it comes time to that, get some more money kicked in to cover some of those costs.
Anybody else?
I've got a question.
Yes, Wally.
Lori, I have a question. I don't understand the increased unemployment expense for prior employees. I've never had to apply for unemployment insurance in my life. I do know how it works, but so someone quit working for us and went to work for somebody else and they got laid off, so they applied against us?
Well, I believe they would have applied, and current and former employers are responsible for contributing to that unemployment expense. And that's about the extent of my knowledge. I don't know if
Does that sound about right?
So essentially, there's a look back period. So say they only worked for the city of Goodyear for say they worked for the city of Goodyear for 5 years, went somewhere else and worked 6 months. I believe the state has an 18-month look back. Don't hold me to the numbers, but I believe it's 18 months.
Wow.
And so then we're responsible for a portion of that unemployment.
Wow, how are we ever going to be able to budget if that keeps happening to us? I mean, how do we know how much money to put on side?
Well, we will be, I've just reviewed the HR-based budget, and we're
Good.
certainly looking at
Yeah.
how to adjust that. I mean, this is an unusual circumstance, so hopefully it won't continue at this level,
Yeah.
but we will be increasing their base budget for next year with the anticipation
Yeah.
that this will continue for a while longer.
Yeah, I'd rather increase it and have it on the books and not use it than having you to come and, or whatever. It
Yep.
just seems to make more sense if we're able to increase it to begin with, we might as well do it. And then if we don't use it, we don't use it.
It will be increasing the base budget consistent
Good.
with our understanding of the requirements.
Good, thanks, Lori, thank you.
Any other discussion? Yes. Bill?
Lori, this has been a crazy year, I think, at a minimum. The work that you guys have done has been absolutely outstanding. I know you've got a large team behind you as well as obviously above you, but you're the face of it, so you get to carry this message back as well. Just kudos to you guys. I'm usually the critic, but I'm throwing the accolades out. Thank you so much for the extra effort, the explanations, even the confusion that we had at the thing. I appreciate the give and take on that whole issue at the retreat. So just thanks for a job well done, and let's put 2020 behind us.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Other comments? Yes. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
same. Thank you so much for being, I think adaptability is the word for the year. But thank you to your team for being adaptable. And also to people listening as well. I mean, we had a 4-hour meeting, so that's probably why there's less questions today than when we first had our last meeting with you. So thank you very much. I think it's gonna be a good budget, and I also am looking forward to 2021. Thank you.
Anyone else? I appreciate how steady you are, and that you're ready to answer any questions. So we're never in doubt when we leave here. And it's so nice to see your body language tonight and how thrilled you are, and you should be. The whole team's done a great job at presenting this and bringing it to us. And I think we're all feeling the same way, but we all want to be cautious too and spend it correctly, and monitor it, because we don't want anything that would cause concern for people. So are we ready to vote on this? Let's say roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Hampton?
Aye.
Councilmember Kano?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
The motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Pretty good, 7:15. Okay. Just a minute. Okay, it's down to comments. All right, Councilman Pizzolo.
Kudos to our Parks Department and Goodyear Rocks. I had the pleasure of introducing our opening band there with the Goodyear Rocks. I know this year I wish it was live versus virtual, but it is what it is as a result of, as Vice Mayor mentioned, the 2020 year. But again, I understand that it went over quite well, and the acts were fantastic. I'm just looking forward in the future to have more of them and hopefully live.
I just knew you were going to enjoy that.
I did.
I figured you were going to be the star. Councilman Campbell.
I just want to report that this week I took 1,200 dozen cookies to Luke Air Force Base. Sherry came over to my house, and she and Tori could not believe the mounds of cookies on every chair, every table, everywhere. But it was so wonderful because it was all from Pebble Creek with the exception of one platter from the chef at La Loma, who is a friend of mine. And when I took it out to Luke, they told me that this was the first year that they had not received any other donation for that cookie drive. And because of us putting out so much, they were able to give it to every airman in the barracks, every squadron, and the security police and the flight line. And it was just amazing.
Good job.
And also, and because of that, which I'm really excited about, it was really a wonderful thing to do. And they were, I would say 99% freshly baked cookies. There were a few store-bought, but most of them were just baked with these wonderful bakers that we have in Pebble Creek. And also, the Pebble Creek Home Tour raised over $11,000 for Shop with a Cop this year. So we have been very busy, and even with COVID, we were able to overcome the obstacles.
Wonderful.
And we did very good. So it was really fun.
Great accomplishment. Thank you.
You're
for
welcome.
all
Well,
the work.
just thank the residents of Pebble Creek. They're the awesome people. Gosh,
They're givers for sure.
they sure are.
Sherry?
Well, thank you, Wally. When we saw all the cookies, it was like, oh my God. I want to thank Parks and everyone and the fire department. They escorted Santa around
Yes.
our whole city,
Yes.
you know, so nobody got to miss Santa. And if you haven't heard, Dr. Fauci said that Santa has special antibodies, so he will not be getting sick. Okay, so he's safe. But I want to thank that because I know, especially the kids, the young ones, are missing all these traditions and everything. So I want to thank him for going the extra mile for that because that really is great. And also noticed our box painted up in a stray, and I've noticed several other ones around the city. It's beautiful. If you haven't made it up there, when you
Yeah.
come up there, it's by the Safeway. It's just very eye catching. It makes you smile in 2020. So.
Yeah.
Nice. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Councilman Hampton?
Also the same thing. thank you for going to other extra neighborhoods with the Santa on the fire engine. A lot of neighborhoods were really, really excited about it. So thank you to staff for that as well. And then also with the art, the hearts that are getting painted around town are really neat to see all the variety and get people excited about our 75th anniversary as well. So they're all unique. They're all really done well, and they're in random places that I wouldn't expect at all times either. So I think it's a neat, special little treat for people in different neighborhoods and different areas of the city to get excited. So I don't even know how many there are. I don't remember, but I know there's quite a few. So yeah. So thank you to staff as well. That's it. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Stitt?
I have nothing to report. I just have a few questions. This past weekend or week, we received a request from a resident about panhandling ordinance, and we promoted the police response team, the hot team, but we didn't really address the issue on why we are not prohibiting panhandling in our city. So if we can get information on that, I think that would be helpful for us. Second is if I think hands-free communication law takes effect in January of 21. I'm looking at the police chief, maybe. Can we just get a follow-up on that and then really start promoting that issue? On my way here tonight, I was in the middle lane. On either side, both drivers, hands on their phone, looking as we were coming down here. So I think it's obviously a statewide issue, but if we can do something to champion that, I think Councilmember Pizzillo would appreciate it more than anybody, but.
Yeah, I'm the one out there on two wheels.
Yeah.
As long as you don't take your eye off the road, looking at the people.
Apparently it's okay. You can hold your
Okay,
phone on the wheel.
I just want to point that out because it's really hard like this. I can see you turning your head. So
Yeah.
I understand though.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then finally, we received this past Friday eviction and foreclosure status updates in the manager's report, which are not surprisingly down simply because there's been a moratorium on it. But it kind of begs the question, what did staff take away, quote unquote, from our conversation at the retreat on the eviction issue? Are we looking at ways to provide us eviction assistance? What are we doing? Because the takeaway that I had from that report was, hey, they're down, there's nothing for us to do. And that is not, I think, the direction that we were talking about at the retreat, about us being prepared for the guillotine, which is going to come in January. And so I'd just like to get the feedback on what do we make of that info? That's it.
Brandon? Thank you.
Just a comment for Bill too. I do appreciate the eviction notice as well. We had a presentation by MAG when I was at the ECDev presentations. They have some good numbers that they're projecting, and by zip code as well. So just something that we could look to prepare what that volume is in our city compared to maybe another city. So there's information out there. So
Thank you for sharing that information. Any other? Laura?
Goodyear has so many good holiday traditions, and of course, everything is shifted and changed this year. But I did catch some of the Goodyear glows. It was a lot of fun and very well done. And I just appreciate how we've been able to maintain those services and those activities that really help build community and our signature events for us, even though we're having to do them differently. And I know we're all looking forward to the point when we can get together again and see each other, but I'm so thankful that we've been able to continue to provide this enriching service to our residents, even so.
Any other comments? I'm going to turn over to the city manager. You all know we're going to have another meeting we'll have a special meeting following this. But
Thank you. And really to follow up on many of the comments, I wanted to provide some of the numbers, the data behind our Goodyear Glows events, because it did look a little bit different this year. So the city brought holiday cheer to residents with 3 nights of Santa, visiting Goodyear neighborhoods in a fire truck sleigh, which culminated this past Saturday with a virtual holiday concert, Santa shout-outs for Santa read letters that he had received over the past month, in between music sets, a tree lighting, and fireworks. We had approximately 1,500 participants who saw Santa while social distancing each night through the neighborhood tours, totaling approximately 4,500 participants. We had almost 5,500 viewers following those tours online. We had over 2,100 viewers who watched the tree lighting online. And so throughout all of the Goodyear Glows events, we estimate we had a total participation of just over 12,000 across all of the activities. And we received many positive comments on social media. So in addition to council's kudos, I'd also like to thank our Parks and Recreation team for bringing us this program, to our residents in the Goodyear Fire Department for their support of the event.
Well, that's all good news, and congratulate all the hard work from everybody and all the joy that it produced. So, great. All right, our next meeting will be a special meeting, December 10th, 2020. And so no further business to discuss. I'm going to adjourn this, and then we're going to start the next meeting. So this meeting is adjourned.